We're going to use a Gen 1 Ford Raptor to talk about horsepower modification comparisons with different products in a way you've never seen before using our horsepower price index. So stay tuned. It all started a couple months ago on a web forum when somebody asked, hey, who's got a spreadsheet with all the different upgrades you can do to your truck to get more horsepower, and which one is the best price? And it was crickets. And then I chimed in. Because I'm that guy. I'm a data-driven individual that loves to crunch the numbers and figure out what's the best bang for your buck. And that's what we're going to talk about today. What I did is I took all the modifications that I could find for a Gen 1 Ford Raptor, that's 2010 to 2014 F-150 Ford Raptor, and looked at validated, verified dyno chart numbers for each one of these modifications. And then with that data, we then created what we call our horsepower price index, which basically is how much do you pay for every horsepower you gain on all of these upgrades? What is the best bang for your buck? What we found is with our horsepower price index was really interesting. So what we have is $27 for a cold air intake per horsepower. Means for every $27 you spend, you get 1 horsepower. All the way to the end of the spectrum, which surprisingly was exhaust, where you have to spend $88 for every 1 horsepower of gain for an exhaust system. And we'll walk through and talk about these items, but sitting in the middle, we have a tuner and turbocharger, superchargers were dead even at about $42 per horsepower, and a throttle body at about $50 per horsepower. Now, it wouldn't be fair to only show you what the best bang for your buck in terms of spend versus horsepower with our HPI index, but let's go ahead and look at total horsepower gains and average costs. So in this chart here, you can see that the cheapest solutions is a cold air intake, averaging about $357 per system, or a turbo or supercharger, which is about $7,300. So this is the average cost of all the different cold air intakes or supercharged turbocharger systems on the market. But of course, horsepower gains, big difference here. 168 horsepower from a forced air induction using a turbo or supercharger, and your least amount of horsepower you get is from the throttle body at about 10 horsepower. All right, so that at least is a fair comparison to show you how much you spend, how much horsepower you get, and then each one of these, let's pull it back up. Once again, each one of these, how much is giving you the most horsepower for every dollar that you've got in this chart here. And obviously the air intakes are the winner, which we're gonna talk a little bit about at $27 per horsepower in cost. All right, so let's break down cold air intakes. So the average price for the cold air intakes is $357. The average horsepower gain, 13. The average torque is 11 foot-pounds. And your cost per horsepower is $27, lowest on the market. Air intakes get a bad rap, and I think a lot of people give them a hard time because they may not give you the most amount of horsepower, but in this instance, for this truck, they give you the most amount of horsepower for the money you pay, period. And so I'm a big believer, especially on these 6.2 liter trucks, 6.2 liter engines for the Ford F-150, that this is the first upgrade you should do because it's simple, you get a lot for your money, and it's worth it. Okay, next we've got is standalone tuners. So what we're talking about is those devices that you plug into your OBD2 port, you can load custom tunes for your truck to increase the horsepower and torque of your vehicle, just that only. We're not talking about a custom tune where you're on a dyno and they're tweaking everything. We're just talking about these out of the box, buy it, load it into your truck, custom tune solutions. So by the numbers, we've got $428 on average for cost, average horsepower gain, 12 horsepower, average torque, 8 foot-pounds, and when you take that by the price, it's $42 per horsepower. So not too bad. This actually ties with the superchargers, which we'll talk about, but this is a good option for you. More specifically, what I love about it is the easiest to install. Cold air intakes are simple, but these are even easier. You literally plug the thing in, follow the directions, no special tools, and they give you an option for a performance tune, an eco tune to save gas mileage, a towing tune for trucks so that way you can get better gas mileage or tow better for whatever equipment you're pulling. This really is a good solution, and that's why it's number 2 on the list in terms of bang for your buck on our horsepower price index. All right, so next on the list is supercharger / turbochargers or forced air induction. So let's look at the numbers. We have an average cost of about $7,380. We have an average horsepower gain of 168, an average torque gain of 161, and just like the tuner, $42 per horsepower, which is great because that means you're paying a lot for a turbocharger or a supercharger, but generally speaking, you're getting a good value for each one of those horsepower gains that you're getting for your money that's going in. Now, obviously, this is the biggest single horsepower upgrade you can do, bolt-on all on its own, which is awesome. All right, so let's talk about throttle bodies, or throttle body, because there's only one on the market. Break it down by the numbers. We've got a cost of about $499, 10 horsepower increase, and 8 foot-pounds of torque, giving you about a $50 per horsepower cost on our horsepower price index, which isn't a ton, but is not too bad. What we like about the throttle bodies on these motors specifically is throttle response. It gives you about the same amount of horsepower, a little bit less than your air intakes, but the throttle response is huge. We call that the butt dyno, meaning what you feel in your seat when you're driving around town makes a big difference, because when you step on that throttle, you get full open throttle, which is great. That is a big plus. All right, so let's talk about the last of the items on the list that cost the most per dollar in order to get your horsepower out, and that is exhaust systems. Specifically, we looked at a lot of catback exhaust systems. So let's break down the numbers and talk about them. So average cost is about $984, not too cheap. 11 horsepower gain on average and 14 horsepower torque. So quite a bit of torque gain with exhaust systems with this motor. But your cost per horsepower, your horsepower index, is $88 per horsepower, which is the highest on the list by far, and which is kind of crazy. People are always, oh, exhaust systems are the best things to get. This is what you need to buy. Let's talk about maybe why. The reason that I think it has to do with it is each exhaust system has the most amount of physical material, like the amount of steel or stainless steel that's used for the exhaust system. It's large, it's heavy, there's high costs. And so I think really what it comes down to with exhaust systems is the cost to make that and then get it to you is just a lot higher than something like a cold air intake or even a supercharger system. And so that's why they cost so much. However, you can't deny the sound. Like the curb appeal or the street appeal, when you rev your engine and that sound comes out, a lot louder, better than stock. That's why people buy exhaust systems, and they're still a good buy, but it's interesting to note that you should buy an exhaust system because you want a little bit more power, but you want the sound. If all you're looking for is just straight horsepower, this might be the last thing that you look at on the list. All right, so there you have it, a breakdown of how much you pay for each amount of horsepower, your best bang for your buck using our horsepower price index for 2010 to 2014 Ford F-150 Raptor. If you're interested in this, specifically on how this might compare with your vehicle, let us know in the comments. We'd love to make some more of these videos, do a bit more research for other trucks, and figure out what the horsepower price index for the parts for that truck is. I would imagine with a Ford EcoBoost motor, it would be very different since it already is turbocharged. Each vehicle is going to be different, each area is going to be different, but at least for these Ford Raptors, this is pretty accurate data, and we stand by our recommendations. We're excited for future videos. Subscribe if you want to see more from our channel, and visit the blog post that we have on this if you want to dive more into the data and the details of how we did this. And we'll see you guys next time.